Recording in.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. This chapter is one that is called Adab al-Mashi al-Salah, and the reason that many scholars talk about this, it's more about the manners on how to actually approach prayer, the manners on how we prepare for the prayer. You guys know the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said that the salah of an individual, depending on the narration, is 27, 25, or 22 times more than the individual prayer. And then he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he goes on to say, and that is because. And then he talks about, making the wudu. He talks about walking to the prayer. He talks about waiting for the prayer to start. And he's saying that basically because of all of these things, because of all the good deeds that are happening in the meantime, while you're actually preparing for salah, your reward is multiplied. So in addition to the actual reward of the salat al-jama'ah, of the congregational prayer in and of itself. So this is not a unique chapter to the Ḥanbalis. This is just a means, or this is just an expression talking about what are the manners when dealing with or preparing for the prayer. What did we talk about last time? You guys remember? I know it's been a long time. So the last thing we actually spoke about was
Was it about the access of the sun?
it was about okay, there it is. All right, I'm sorry. We had talked about what happened. What was that? Oh, it was on the phone. Okay, so basically we had talked about the intention, and we had said what is unique to the Ḥanbalis and the I forgot who else saw the intention to be before the prayer. I think it was the Hanafis. So I think the Hanafis and the Ḥanbalis, they saw it to be an intention to be something that happens before the prayer, versus the other madhāhib where they said it was actually something that was essential, that was part of the prayer itself. So basically, the Ḥanbali position is it happens right before prayer, versus the Shafis and the Malikis that say it's an integral part of the prayer in and of itself. So like we said, the next chapter, because now we're actually talking about entering the prayer and beginning the prayer. So this is why you have a discussion of the manners that have to do with dealing with the prayer itself and how to prepare for it. So what are some things that you guys would imagine would come in this chapter to prepare for the salah? Not having wudu before. Is it necessary if I'm going to the masjid or if I'm going to prepare for the prayer? Is wudu a condition to go for the salah? No. The wudu is a condition for what? For the prayer itself, right? In order for my prayer to be valid, I need to make wudu, but it's not a condition for me to go to the masjid. But why is it better that I make wudu before I go? So think about all the things the Prophet ﷺ talked about when he said go to the prayer. He said to make wudu, not to rush, right? And to get there early. What are some commonalities between these three? Like, why do all those things? And can you just keep an eye on this and hit admit every time you see someone?
So I think for you to walk slowly.
Yeah.
And the other is to go early is because your solar actually starts before. Once you get there, you don't want to do that.
Good. You don't want to be mentally rushed, right? This is one of the things, because one of the biggest one of the biggest plots of the shaitan is to rush the individual. So if you take all of these steps to prepare beforehand and you actually get to the masjid, you already have wudu, you're early, you didn't rush on your way there. What happens is, like, now you're clear, right? Your mind is clear. There's not too many things that you need to focus on. And Allah knows best. It would seem that these are the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ encouraged that and tried to make sure that everybody was ready before they got to the prayer, before they got to the salah. Sorry. So walk with tranquility and dignity, right? So what does this mean? What does it mean to walk with tranquility and walk with dignity?
Calm.
To walk calmly. Why is that important?
Well, again, you're not rushing.
I'm sorry? The idea is not to. Okay, what's the problem with rushing?
You can get in a car crash.
You can get into an accident. Right? And that's like more of a modern contextualization of it, right? You can actually, and why are you more likely to get into an accident when you're rushed? Because you're not focused, you're not paying attention. And remember, what is the reasoning that the Prophet ﷺ has for giving these, for us being prepared to go to the prayer? So that we are focused on what we're doing, focused on where we're going. Because the moment that we lose our focus, that is the time, or that is the moment that you'll actually get into an accident, or you can get into a crash. You can hurt someone else, you can take someone else's way. And many times we will find, especially during the prayers, what happens when a person is rushed, right? They'll park illegally, or they'll cut someone off, they'll get somebody else angry. You become so self-focused, right? You become so self-focused during those things. You become so selfish during those things that all of the reward that you had for the prayer, what happens to it? Right, it goes away. You went to do this good deed, and had you gone on time, had you been relaxed, you wouldn't have had these issues, you wouldn't have had these problems. And I'm the last point to protect this. So here in the madhāhib, it says rushing to catch the congregation is reasonable. Why?
Because you get more reward.
Okay, there's definitely more reward, right? Getting there before the Imam starts, there's more reward in that. But are these two things contradictory, or are these two things related?
They're related in the sense that you should be prompted to leave your house early.
But if I'm running a little bit late and I rush, how does a person feel when they get to the masjid and you wanted to get there before the salah started and it already started?
Yeah, you will be demoralized.
You'll be demoralized, and during prayer, what's going to happen? You're going to be distracted. And subhanAllah, if you think about all these, it all has to do with distraction, because what is one of the purposes of salah? To gain sakina, and to gain khushu', right? To gain tranquility, to be at peace with our relationship, with our conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So removing all of the distractions possible, the reasonable ones, and getting them out of the way in order to actually get to the prayer. This is one way of helping that situation, one way of helping one way of helping and one way of stopping all of those distractions. Taking short steps. This is something that is unique to the madhāhib. Why do you take short steps?
More distance becomes longer.
Not just the distance becomes longer. When you take short steps, what happens? So like if I take long steps like this, right, versus taking steps like this.
More reward.
There's more reward, and this is more of a catch on the technicality, which is what?
Oh, because you're taking more.
Because you're taking more steps, and the Prophet ﷺ said what?
You're doing more work.
For every step you take, you receive one good deed, and one bad deed is removed. So if you take a very literalist approach to the hadith, what you're going to come to the conclusion that what?
I'm getting more sanat.
Right?
Yes.
Does this mean I should start walking like this? But it doesn't mean obviously to start walking in that way, but try to shorten your gait. Try to shorten your gait so that you end up taking more steps. Don't interlace the fingers. So interlacing the fingers is shabak, like this. Why, or tashbik? Why is this a problem?
While you're walking?
So yeah, while you're walking, while you're waiting for the prayer.
Wasn't that abrogated because you say Naha Rasulullah tashbik, but was abrogated to my understanding?
All right. I'm saying even if we say Naha, the karahiyah can still stand, right? Because you can say that it's narrated with meaning, not necessarily his wording. So the thing is, even if you have a prohibition of it, the prohibition will be taken as disliked. It wouldn't be taken as prohibited. So what is the problem with this though? Why is this an issue if I'm waiting? All right, I'll show you right now. I'm waiting for salah.
It seems like you're on your toe, like you're anxious or.
Right, it gives off this impression of laziness. Not just that. When I'm waiting like this is actually a sign of anxiety, right? What am I doing? Like I'm anxious and I'm waiting, or it could be considered ill-mannered, right? Or it can be considered ill-mannered, and ill-mannered is obviously going to be a cultural representation, right? So different cultures might find it ill-mannered, but in general, even in our American culture, like standing like this it's not something that's looked up on, right? It's something that's generally looked down on because it's like, because it's strange, to stand like this, right? To stand like this, or to like, you know, you feel, it's like you're anxious about something.
And even if you're not, if you do it, your body becomes anxious.
Yes, right. So it kind of feeds into that anxiousness. Like, so reciting from Shu'ara or dua nur, Allahumma jalni min nura wa yani min fawqi nura, right? All this dua, doing all of these things before the prayer. These are all thabit. These are all established on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are a number of other dua that are mentioned in the Umdah, in the text itself. You can go back and you can refer to those different dua, inshallah. And here you have an example. Within it, you have an example of tawassul. And this is the opinion of the madhāhib. This is the fiqh opinion of the madhāhib, that it is something that is allowed. Ibn Qudamah himself is something that he's mentioning, something that he allows, and this is the agreed upon opinion of the Ḥanbali madhāhib, that tawassul is something that is legislated and is something that is allowed. So if the obligatory prayer overrides other prayers in the masjid, what does that mean?
Like somebody's praying sunnah and then somebody.
And then you hear the iqamah, right? So if I'm praying the sunnah and I hear the iqamah, I'm supposed to what? I'm supposed to salam out, I'm supposed to leave the prayer, and I'm supposed to join the jama'at, I'm supposed to join the congregation. But what if I'm in the tashahhud and the iqamah is called? What should I do?
Yeah, you should finish it.
At that point, I can complete the prayer. But what if I just started the prayer? Right, then I have to leave the prayer and I have to join the congregation. And the dua for entering and exiting the masjid. I enter the masjid with my right foot, right? And the dua for entering the masjid is Allahumma aftahni ababa rahmatik, right? And stepping out with the left foot. This is not, I don't think it's a sunnah. I think this is just something that the ulama have done qiyas on. And you say what? Is that Allahumma khalil? I don't remember the dua.
It's actually a small one.
Right, it's a smaller one.
Sheikh in Google.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's Allahumma khalil.
But it continues.
Yeah?
Yeah, like just.
Okay. I mean, so if anybody knows, please share. Or if anybody remembers, it's slipping my mind right now. So everything we've talked to or spoken about, everything we've discussed up until this point. What happened? What did you find?
It just gives, it says, yeah, when entering is Allahumma aftahli wa rahmatik Allahumma inni as'aluka min fadlik. It says,
It's nothing for exiting? It's okay. We'll find it and we'll share it, inshallah. So the next part of this is the description of the prayer. How do you actually pray? Right? Up until this point, we've talking about preparing for the prayer, getting ready for it. What are some of the manners in dealing with it? Now we're actually going to discuss how to pray. And what is unique about the prayer is the number of narrations that we have that describe the prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Most famously from the companion, I don't know if you guys are aware, Wa'id ibn
Omar.
Hujr.
Really?
Wa'id ibn Hujr, right? It's like he's the most famous companion to narrate the beginning to the end. He narrated it in front of other companions, and none of the other companions said anything. And what does that mean? Right, so this is like an acceptance of what he had presented, saying, I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam praying like this, and he described the prayer from beginning to end. There is some khilaf on some of the wordings of the different of the hadith itself, but in general, we have a very good idea of how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prays. So the prayer itself, the takbirat are said aloud by the Imam and silently by the follower. So you have the Imam and then you have the Ma'mun, right? So you have the individual who's leading the prayer and then you have the person who is following. All of the actions of prayer are said aloud by the Imam. And the Ma'mun or the follower, none of the actions are said aloud. Why?
Because if everyone says Allahu Akbar different times, it's going to be chaotic.
Exactly. This does not lead to harmony, right? It doesn't lead to harmony in the prayer. It can be very distracting for someone else. Somebody's a little bit later or a little bit before the Imam. What can happen? You're going to confuse other people. Somebody might be making sajda. Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was leading one time, somebody was reciting behind him, and what happened? After prayer, he's like, who was reciting behind me? And the companion said, I was. And the Prophet ﷺ, what did he say to him? He said, when the Quran is being recited, just listen to my recitation. Don't recite. Don't recite with me. Why? Because it's distracting, right? Because it's distracting. You can actually mess up the person's qira'ah. You can mess up the person's recitation. Standing with the iqamah. So this is, again, this is a madhab specific view that when the Imam says, qad qamat as-salah, then the individual stands up in preparing for the prayer. And why is that? Because of the actual meaning, right? Yet that the prayer has been established or the prayer is about to start, so you stand up for the prayer. Like, raising the hands for the takbir of entering the prayer, this is known as takbiratul ihram. This is known as takbiratul ihram. Why? And where else have you guys heard the word ihram before?
The Umrah.
For the Hajj or Umrah. So what is the relationship between the takbiratul ihram of the salah and the ihram that we wear for Hajj or for Umrah?
Allahu Alam, but I think because when you put on that ihram, you're in a state of sanctity.
So it's a state, right? So that's something that's important to remember and keep in mind. That both of these are states. In the ihram, in the physical ihram, it is a state of what? What is haram at that point? What can I not do in ihram?
Okay, I cannot do what I cannot feel.
Right, you can't hunt, right? You can't take from your nails or your hair.
Shower,
Right.
You can't.
No, you can't. You can't perfume yourself.
Yeah.
Right after you take the ihram.
You cannot marry.
You can't get married, nor can you propose, nor
Can you
receive proposals. Right. So there are a number of things that you can't do because you're in that state. Like in the takbirat al-ihram or the state of salah, what are things that you can't do?
I cannot eat.
Right, you can't eat, you can't drink, like things that you can do in ihram. There's things that you can't do in salah. There's some khilaf on drinking, but we'll talk.
Really?
Yeah,
Like
man.
your throat gets dry.
I mean, just
Don't start.
don't start, man.
I even heard like blowing your nose, like there's a khilaf on that.
Yeah. So like you're gonna find khilaf on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like drinking during the nawafil for some of you have narrations of some of the companions that it's okay, but I mean whatever. So yeah. In general, you can't. We're talking about obligatory prayers now. You can't eat, you can't drink, you can't speak, right? You can't move around unnecessarily, right? I can't just like pick up, start checking the time or playing with my phone during prayer. Initially, when the prayer was obligated, you could actually have conversation, right? You could actually have conversation when the prayer was first obligated, and then afterward, this was abrogated, and you could not have conversation anymore at that point. So how is the takbir supposed to be? Your palms face the qibla. Your palms face the qibla, and it can either be raised to the shoulders or the earlobes, right? At this point, like either of these 2 points. Obviously, it's a approximation. You don't have to be like take a ruler and start, getting super precise. There might be some people who do that, but in general, that's not something that should be done. So the hands are extended with the fingers together, meaning that they should be like this, right? They should be like this. Some of the madhāhib say they should be a little bit looser, but nobody says they should be apart, right? The hands are placed below the navel, and when is this? This is when you are standing in the qiyam. In the Hanafi and the Ḥanbali madhab, the hands are to be like this. They're below the navel. They're below the navel. In the Ḥanbali madhab, who says to place the? Okay, so you have different opinions on where to place the hands. Above the navel, right? This is the Maliki and the Shafi'i. Below the navel, this is the Hanafis and the Ḥanbalis. The Ḥanbalis also have a statement. This statement is also you'll find with the Hanafis also below the navel. It's kind of equal in the madhab, either or. Yeah, you choose. And then you have the chest like this. This you have mostly the hadith scholars who say that like this.
Like this?
It's either like this or like this. I've seen some pretty interesting ones. I've seen like this.
Actually,
This you can't do. Like I've seen people pray like this, but you're not allowed to pray like that. But this is the one that is very common by, the one of the hadith scholars. It'll be like this, or grabbing the wrist. Huh?
Is that qabd?
Qabd is, all of these are qabd.
Okay.
Why? Because you're actually grabbing, right?
Okay.
So whether it be on the chest, whether it be above the navel, whether it be below the navel, this is all.
Got it.
That's
Okay.
only for
This-
guys, right?
I'm sorry?
That's only for guys.
No, so all of this, what we're talking about now, this applies to everyone. There in the madhab, there's exceptions for how women sit, but in general, the prayers are very similar. So again, hadith scholars, they put it on the chest. I mean, you have, and I feel the more literal you are, it just seems like the higher it goes. I've seen people, like they.
I haven't seen that. That's
I've
weird.
seen it,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, you don't look comfortable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
you don't. It doesn't seem very natural. I'm sorry.
The long tarawih.
Yeah, so and
the rest just,
Is it like right above
there's
your
a place for your
Yeah.
cheek.
and obviously the
Huh?
and also the sadal. This is a famous position in the Malikis, right? And also the Shia, the Jafaris, they pray like this too. Where are you supposed to look in the madhab? The madhab, you are supposed to look at the place of prostration. Question? Okay. But you have differences of opinion. You can actually look forward in the Maliki madhab. You're allowed to look forward. Closing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't like straightforward. You can look at when you're in Mecca. You can look.
You can actually look at the Kaaba. Yeah.
But then like when you're standing, it's like forward but not straight.
That's
It's like still at the floor.
Yeah,
but
it's like a little
further
bit,
down the road.
like further downward.
Yeah.
And what's the idea? The idea is to stay focused during the
Yeah.
prayer. That's all it is. Why the place of prostration? Because it is a focal point, right? And everybody has a general idea of where they're going to prostrate. Looking forward, there's nothing wrong with it. Even closing the eyes in a lot of the madhahib, it's makruh, it's disliked, but it is something that is allowed. Looking at the finger during the tashahhud, again, this is in the madhab. I don't know if there is khilaf on this. If you're supposed to be looking elsewhere during tashahhud, but I believe all the madhahib hold this opinion, and we'll talk about the different forms, the different ways of doing tashahhud.
For the Shafis, we have two. You look at prostration.
Yeah.
You go back.
So the Ḥanbalis, we're the most complicated when it comes to tashahhud. And it's like it's so tiring, but when we get to it, I'll talk about it. I'm just like, why? Like, who came up with this? So the opening of the prayer, this is called the istiftah, and you have the dua, istiftah. This is sunnah, right? The dua that an individual makes when he starts the prayer, this is a sunnah, meaning you don't have to say it. And for the Malikis, they actually don't have one. They'll start Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Right? It's not, there's no dua, there's no iftah, Subhanallahumma wa bihamdika wa ta'ala jaddika wa ta'ala jaddika wa la ilaha ghayrak. This is one dua, Allahumma ba'id bayni wa bayna khatayai. This is another dua. There are a number of dua that you can actually begin your prayer with. Or you can leave the dua altogether. Again, it is something that is sunnah, and nobody obligates the dua when you start the prayer. Isti'adah, saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. This is from the in the madhab, saying the basmala silently, right? Saying it silently versus saying it out loud. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen versus Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So where does this difference of opinion come from? Why is the basmala said silently for the Ḥanbalis, the Malikis, and the Hanafis, but it's said out loud for the Shafi'is? What is the reason that you guys can think of?
It's not necessarily part of
It's not part of Fatiha,
Fatiha.
right? It's not part of Fatiha. And if you don't consider the basmala to be part of Fatiha, you will not,
Say loud.
you won't say it out loud, right? It's because it's not, and just to give an example, you wouldn't say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Maliki Yawmiddin, right? I wouldn't skip Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim because I considered it to be part of the Fatiha. It's the same thing with the basmala. If I consider it to be part of it, then I would read it out loud. If I don't consider it to be part of Fatiha, but an ayah, a separate ayah from the Quran, I would read it silently. Then you read Fatiha. The recitation of the Imam is enough in both the Hanafi and the Ḥanbali madhab, meaning,
You don't have to recite it.
right, the ma'mun, the one who's behind, he does not have to recite it. There is an agreement that Fatiha needs to be recited. The only difference of opinion is on who, right? Is it the Imam only, or is it the Imam and the ma'mun? So during the pauses, the madhab allows an individual to recite behind the imam, but the interesting in the madhab is you do not have to leave a gap. So you can say, وَلَضَّالِّينَ آمين قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ, right? So I didn't leave a gap there. But عندكم, I think in Shafi'i, you guys have to leave a gap.
Because it's for
For the ma'mun. So again, there's a difference of opinion on that. But in the madhab, you don't have to leave a gap. But if there is a gap, sometimes there's a natural gap because the imam is catching his breath in order to start the next recitation. It is completely reasonable to recite the Fatiha. So if surah after Fatiha, it is a sunnah. It is a sunnah, and how the madhab has split up the surahs is into long, medium, and short. As you notice, this is the last part of the Quran. This is the end of the Quran, meaning in the madhab, it is not preferred to recite from the beginning or the middle. Why?
It's very long.
Not just because it's very long, it is sunnah to recite a complete surah. Right? So to recite a surah in its totality, this is what is the sunnah in the madhab. And this is why they've started from Qaf to Nas. And what's interesting here, it is only the Fajr that is long. Which prayer is missing that we normally assume to be long? Isha. Right? Even Isha is mixed. Sometimes you can make it long, sometimes you can make it short. And Maghrib is always going to be short. Does this mean that you can't mix it up for the other prayers? You can, but this is just what is the recommended way to pray. So like I said, the reasoning behind this, from the choice from here to here, there's a few. Number one, because you can recite the surah in its entirety, which is something that is preferred in the madhab. And secondly, you will have people who are praying behind you, and there's a good chance that they will know one of these surahs, versus taking from other parts of the Quran, where the people behind, if you make a mistake, there's nobody there who can or has the ability to correct it. So the recitation is allowed in the first 2 units or the first 2 rak'ah. This, I'm sure everyone's aware of them, Fajr, Maghrib, and Isha. If a person recites silently, if he does it accidentally, that's fine. If he does it purposely, the salat is still valid. The prayer is still valid, even if he does it silently. But the imam needs to be told it's not something that should happen time and again.
Do you have to pray such a seven?
No. If you're doing it on purpose.
What if you're by yourself?
If you're by yourself, you can recite it silently the whole time. It's not a problem.
They said they can't see.
Am I walking around too much? Can they hear me?
Yeah, I mean they see.
Okay. They can see the presentation?
Sorry.
Now I see Sonic Chef. Now I can see you.
The camera was turned off on the computer.
Sorry, I blame Ramshay. So, what happened?
Oh, oops, that might have been for me.
No, just okay, good. Yeah, you don't have to do such a sahu. There's no sahu for if you recite silently in jama'ah, right? In jama'ah, there's no sahu. Why? Because it's sunnah, right? So leaving off a sunnah doesn't necessitate the sahu. Leaving off. I don't think it's all sunnah. I think there's sahu.
Because we have hayat,
Yeah.
sunnah, and
Now, even with some things like in the madhab, it gets confusing because sometimes you have furud and wajibat, and they're different at different times. So, yeah.
So,
yeah, it is.
Wajib is so annoying as a term.
There's
like, what's even the point? Like,
no, because there are points where it's like, okay, you have to do it, but it's not like.
It's like you're sinful either way, but it's not all the way fun. Like.
So when basically what happens in the madhab when they start differentiating like between furud and wajib and stuff like that, it's basically to say that okay, there's a sin for it, but it is not it's not a pillar of the action.
So like you could
versus a fard.
I see. Whereas like you're actually
a wajib you can leave it off, and you'll be accountable for it, but the action itself is still complete.
I see. No, that makes sense.
Except for the Ahnaf is different.
This? I don't get it. It's the same word.
So raising the hands. When do you do it in the madhab? There are only three times. There are only three times in the Ḥanbali madhab where you raise their hands. Takbirat al-ihram, going into ruku' and coming up from ruku'. That's it. There is no other time in the madhab that you raise your hands. The Shafi'is, you guys do it. No. When you come up from the second, from the first tashahhud.
Yes.
Right? From the first tashahhud. For the Hanbalis, you don't have to. Your fingers, again, palms facing the qibla, your fingers should be together. Takbirat al-ihram, this is agreed upon amongst all the madhāhib that you raise your hands at this point, regardless of the madhab that you follow. Before and after ruku', like we said, this is something that is agreed upon between the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila. But for the Hanabila, there is no other place. And like we said, standing for the third rak'ah, for the Shafi'is, they do it. Ruku', place the hands on the knees and spread out the fingers. So the ruku', I hope I don't look like a fool doing this, but the ruku' is like, I don't know if you guys you can catch this.
If you back up towards the projector.
Back up toward the projector.
Yeah.
I mean, I can work on
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, there you go.
So if you can see, my fingers are spread out and they're facing downward.
Yeah.
That's completely fine. Your back should also be straight. So am I okay right here?
Yeah.
So your back should be straight. Is my back straight?
Yeah.
Okay. So your back should be straight. This is the, I don't want to talk about myself like this, but this is the ideal. This is the ideal ruku' where you're at basically you're a 90-degree angle and your back is straight and you're still looking at the place of prostration.
Like you should be able to put a cup of water on your back.
Yes, a cup of water. Yes, right. You should.
They used to do that in Mother's.
Oh, really? Oh,
Oh
wow.
God.
That's pretty serious.
Yeah.
When you do it like that, your back is stretched, and you say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. And the minimum that it has to be done is one time. Right? It has to be one time. The sunnah is 3, and you can extend it up to 10.
Wait, out of curiosity,
Yeah.
what happens if you, maybe this is a stupid question, what happens if you do it 11 times?
If you do it, how many times?
11.
11. It's okay. I mean, it's not. There's
No,
no,
I just,
yeah.
like, when there's like hard numbers like that, I'm just curious. So, like,
No, so the only hard number is this one, and maybe a little less than 3, right? The 1, why? Because the minimum requirement. The 3, because this is sunnah.
Yeah, okay.
But that's all. Increasing on that, obviously, if I can do 10, I can do 20, I can do 30.
Right.
It's not an issue.
Okay.
This is considered the ideal because of the hadith of Anas, right? Because the hadith of Anas, like he went to pray and he prayed behind Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and he said, I have not seen a prayer more similar to the prayer of the Prophet ﷺ except the prayer of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Ibn Abdul Aziz obviously never met the Prophet ﷺ. He was a Khalifa from like 99 to 101 or something like that.
2 years.
I'm sorry? Yeah, he was just a Khalifa for 2 years. And he died. He had a natural death. And then Anas radiallahu anh, he lived until like I want to say, he lived around the same time. I think he died around like 90. I think he died 90. And then Abu ibn Tufail, the most well-known companion, he died like 110. And I think there were some Bedouin Sahaba who were left after that. So, subhanAllah, looking at the place of prostration. Any questions on any of these?
Yeah, so can I make a dua when I'm ruku?
I have to check the ruling in the madhab,
Okay.
but there are a number of scholars of hadith who allow it. Rising from ruku', Sami Allahu liman hamida. Allah hears the one that praises him. And in congregation, in the madhab, only the imam says this. The ma'mun does not say this. رَبَّنَا لَكَ الْحَمْدُ وَرَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ مَلَأَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. To you, our Lord, is all praise, deserving of filling the heavens and the earth. In congregation, this is said by both the imam and the ma'mun. There is a difference of opinion. I think Ibn Taymiyyah is the only one who says, him and his student Ibn Qayyim, he says that everybody says both. But in the opinion in the madhab is that this is for the imam only, and this is for everyone. And obviously, we said raising the hands, whether you're coming down or you're going up. When do you actually say this? So in the madhab, you would say this before moving positions. This is when you say this is where you, that's a good way of placing this. The dua or the dhikr that you make to change positions, this is done before you do it. Right? This is done before you do it. The Ḥanbalis are the only ones that say this is wajib. They say that you must say it before you change positions. All the other madhāhib say it is mustahab, it is recommended. I usually do it before I finish locking into the position. The reason is because there are people who are praying behind me. If you say it too early, people are going to perceive the Imam. So when you stand, you should stand with tamaneen. What's interesting about this is that you have the Hanafis, they don't make tamaneen a condition for coming up from ruku'. Meaning that I can be in ruku'. Right, I didn't even fully stand. That for the Hanafis, that would be considered valid. Being fully standing, this is a condition. For many of the other madhāhib, for the Hanafis, they say no, it's okay. It's not a big deal. It's not a problem. It doesn't invalidate the prayer. After you come up, you can either tie your hands or you can do sadal in the madhab. But for the Hanafis, the Shafi'is, and the Malikis, they all do sadal. Right? They all do sadal.
Yeah, I'm coming up from ruku'.
This is coming up from ruku'. Yeah. Prostration. How do you prostrate? This is more of like a modern difference of opinion that has been kind of, I think, over exaggerated a bit. So basically, you have two conflicting narrations on Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, on how to go into sajda. His narration says that you go with your hands first, and you have other narrations from him that say you go with your knees first. And a lot of this is based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He says, I think that tubarrak buruk al-ibil or something like this is the wording. It's like, don't sit like a camel. You guys ever seen a camel sit?
Mm-hmm.
I should probably put a video, right? I think that's a good point to put it.
Isn't it knees first?
So a camel doesn't have hands, right? So,
yeah.
But the thing is, that's where the contention and that's where the argument comes. They're like, okay, well, technically the front arms of the camel or the front legs of the camel are its hands. That's why you can't go down with your hands first. The problem I have is if anybody's ever seen a camel sit, it very clearly goes like this, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the khilaf comes. That's where the khilaf comes from. It's equal. It's not a big deal. Like,
I'm not doing my hands first.
so you go hands first. He's the only one. Like the rest of them, they say you
First.
say you go knees first. And then getting up there for the Ḥanbalis, they say that the best way to get up is like this. The best way to get up is like this. And then secondary, if you need support, you can either do this with your hands flat, or you can get up with your fists. That's all.
Don't the Shafi'is have it as like a condition to like come up, pause, and then like go up from your hands?
No, you don't go from your hands.
You go from your knees.
And then when you get up from the subsequence backwards.
Yes. So basically, it's backwards from how you go down.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But it was like, but you,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then reverse.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You-
But
you
they always
throw your hands up like
they
that.
always pause though. I always see them do like a pause, like
Yeah. I mean,
they like get to their knees and then go forward.
yeah. So this is called jalsat istiraha, and
Yeah.
you have some of the madhāhib who say that there has to be a pronounced sitting before you get up.
Okay.
Why does there have to be a pronounced sitting? Because it's more graceful, right?
Mhm.
Versus just making one movement.
Okay.
That's all. These discussions sometimes they can get a bit tedious, right? You know,
Yeah.
like in the details, like okay, you have to do it like this, and you have to do it like that. Just
Just frame it.
so I mean, basically, the entire idea of this. Why is it so detailed? So that people maintain their grace and their composure during prayer. That's actually the goal. That when you pray, you don't look like you're like flailing around. You know what I mean? Like you look graceful going up and down. Like so, when people look at you praying, they're actually like, okay, you know, this is a proper way. This is an exemplary way to pray. There's like, I've seen like all different ways of praying. You know, I've seen people get up like, you know, they'll be like this and they'll get up like this,
Yeah, I've seen that.
you know, and like takes, it's just really exaggerated. And that's why you have why it's so precise. It's so precise because that idea of grace and fluidity during prayer is something that's really important. It's really something that's fundamental. So the prostration, I guess, you know what time is it?
8:12.
Okay. All right, so what we'll end with prostration. So the prostration is when you're in. Oh, I need to sit down again. So when you're prostrating, ideally, I'm sorry. Oh yes, sorry.
Yep, good.
So when you're prostrating, your hands, your arms should be away from your side, except during congregation. Except during congregation. So basically, I would make sajda like this, normally. But in congregation, I would make sajda like this. Why?
Don't to bother next
So I
person.
don't bother the person next to me, right? I don't want to bother the person next to me. And some people, they'll still make it a point to,
Accidentally
to spread,
opening the
to like eagle, you know what I mean? Like eagle spread. And you have to think about other people when you're praying.
screws.
It works during social distancing.
3 feet apart, you're good.
And how do you your thighs should be apart and your feet should be apart too, right? So there's a gap between my feet. There's actually a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he would place his shoes between his feet when he prayed, and that aids to the idea that there was a gap. Fingers are flat, they're facing the qibla. My toes are also facing, my toes are facing the qibla. Again, the idea is to be graceful during the prayer. Make sure that you're paying attention to everything that you're doing. And you say in the dua or the dhikr to make during the sajda, subhana rabbil a'la. And so the skin doesn't need to touch. It's not a condition. I can pray with gloves and I can pray with this. Like, for example, this is covering my forehead.
Hey, really?
Yeah. I can pray like this and I can pray with gloves, but the Shafi'is, absolutely not. You have to pray like this, and you cannot wear gloves. You have to have you have to have skin contact with the places of prayer.
Have you seen people in the snow? Just
So you'll find in some of the Hanafi books for women where they'll say the entirety of the arm should be on the ground.
But it's not.
But it shouldn't be, right? Your arm should actually be away from the ground. The whole idea behind it is that the Hanafi approach to women praying is so that they are they're as like hidden and benign as possible during the prayer. They're not as pronounced as men.
I see.
Is there sujood for men and women different in the madhāhib?
No, just the sitting.
Okay.
Just the sitting.
Interesting.
These are the two types of sitting. This is called iftirash, and this is called tawarruk. You guys see the difference?
Yeah.
It's do I have to show this one too? Okay, good. This is not easy for everyone, right? This is not easy for everyone. You got to be a little bit what's the word? Nimble.
the first one, I like it. No, the second one, impossible. I don't even.
I've never seen it.
That's the Maliki way, and I'm like, bro, you're like sitting over your leg, like, and you're sitting. I'm a big dude. I can't get up after that. Like, I'm settled.
Yeah, but you could probably do this in like the last.
The very last one,
the
but
last
there's a guy
one.
next to me, like I'm leaning on it. Like my back is like all the way out here, like no way. So not happening.
These are the two ways. These are the two ways to sit during the tashahhud, or also the jalsa between the two tashahhud.
But no one says you can put your foot flat.
So
Because I see people either crossing their feet or like that.
Yeah,
their right foot is flat.
So basically, see this sitting for the or no, this one more so. But for women in the madhab, this foot would actually be, it would come across. Right. So this foot would be relaxed, just like this one is. That's the only difference.
Okay.
I think, and I don't know if it applies to the iftirash. I know for sure it applies to tawarruk. This I don't remember.
Okay.
But
This is similar.
I'm saying this also.
Okay.
Like the Shafi, there's no difference. Only
Yeah.
sujood.
Okay.
She grabs herself.
She makes herself small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the breast will touch her
Yeah.
thighs. and-
Yeah. She makes herself as small as
Yeah.
possible. So since the tashahhud, we have time. But the tashahhud in the madhab is your finger has to point every time Allah is mentioned. It's bad confusing.
You gotta really be paying attention.
No,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like it's like
I'd be getting
such,
lost in the sauce.
no, actually, it's just such a mental exercise. Yeah.
Lillahi?
And lillahi, anytime lillahi or Rabb is mentioned, you have to raise your finger. So you're saying, no, you put it down. That ashhadu anna
Put it
Muhammadan
like this.
Rasulullah.
Like that?
No, only when you say Allah. So only when Allah is
No,
mentioned.
أشهد أن محمد رسول الله.
Not Rasulullah, yeah. It's, bro.
As a Malikis, we just have fun with it. You know what I mean? Just little swordplay action. Blow away the shaitan. I mean.
Yeah, so every time Allah is mentioned, then you do the check. It's just, it's so tedious. You're like sitting there, like you're thinking, all right, no, wait.
You just like forget
It's like you forget what's going on. And again, that's in the for the Hanafis is the easiest. For the Hanafis is the easiest. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And then you put it back down. That's it done. For the Malikis, they're constantly moving it. And there are a number of different opinions on how to deal with the tashahhud. Do you move the finger? Do you keep it straight? Again, it's not like a real deal record. I think it's like the least
Like this.
of the issues. The Ḥanbalis, you hold it like this, right? So you actually you connect the thumb and the middle finger,
Okay.
right? And this is how you would hold it, and you would move it like random.
It's like, oh, I think right here.
So the second tashahhud, this is something that is unique to the madhab. I don't think the Shafis, you don't require this. The Dua Ibrahimiyya is a condition in the Hanbalis.
Oh.
You have to make the Dua Ibrahimiyya in the second tashahhud. Allahumma salli ala
Oh, it's a
Muhammad.
book.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So before taslim, you can make dua, and because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said the best dua is fi dubur as-salah, right? At the end of the prayer before you make the taslim. These are the four madhabi opinions on how to deal with it. The easiest is the Malikis. You can make dua for whatever you want in any language.
The people.
Versus the Ḥanbalis, it has to be known and they're the strictest. It has to be known, it has to be transmitted up until the tabi'in. So
The
you
dua has to be.
the dua, yeah. So it can be from the Prophet ﷺ, it can be from the companions, or it can be from the tabi'in.
You better really know your dua.
And yes, exactly. And it has to be in Arabic. It has to be in Arabic. The Shafis are a little bit easier. They say that if you're not Arab, then you can make dua in your mother language. The Hanafis,
Second generation, already. You're screwed.
right? And the Hanafis, the translation is allowed, but it is makruh, which is strange because in the madhab you can actually pray in other than Arabic. Yeah, it's just, we'll deal with that another time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So what's interesting is this is something that is somewhat shared between the Ḥanbalis and the Malikis. The proper Ḥanbali tasneem would be Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Right? Versus the Maliki, which Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Right? You would say it very quietly. But this is something that's shared versus the Hanafis and the Shafis, they're both equal, right? They're both equal sounding. It's not a big deal. And also the second tasneem is not necessary. Second tasneem is not necessary. In order to exit the prayer, the first tasneem is enough.
Is it a weak hadith? Okay, so like growing up, there was like you do both salams because you're like saying what's up to the angels.
Yes.
Is that legit?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. But the thing is, we're talking about, is that salam an obligation for the angels or is it a way of exiting the prayer? And the first one is guaranteed and the second one is
My mom was when I became mad, she was like, "So what? You're not saying I'm the other angel anymore?"
He'd be like, he's like, just tell him to stop writing. Tell him to stop writing down my bad deeds. Maybe you'll get some more attention.
But there's no, there's one thing I don't see, there's niyyah to exit. You guys don't have the niyyah to exit.
There's no niyyah to exit. The taslim is enough to exit the prayer.
Shafi'i, you
Yeah, you gotta have the niyyah to
exit.
exit. You gotta talk out.
That's being Shafi'i was the most stressful part of my life.
Listen, you know the most stressful part of my life? Right here, bro.
Yeah.
So once you do it,
Uh-huh.
so you can just keep it, but after that you just.
No, you bring it down. So every time Allah is mentioned, you bring it up,
Okay.
and then you bring it down.
Okay. I'll try it.
Allah I suggest you try it for a sunnah, not an obligation. So the next part, inshallah, we're going to talk about if a prayer is more than 2 rak'ah, how to deal with that, inshallah. There's slight differences, there aren't too many, but it will open up the floor for questions because we're about to call it that, inshallah. Allahu a'lam wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So if anybody's on the Zoom, you're more than welcome to ask. I think everybody can unmute themselves, right?
Yeah. Let me see the chat is. Assalamu alaikum. May I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. So my question is more not fiqh wise, but more. So I'm always wondering what would be a spiritual meaning of rafa' al-yadayn, that is raising the hands. I understand bowing down. I understand sajda, but what about the raising of hands? Do you have any idea? Okay.
Should we pause the recording?
Well, I mean, you can't. No.